Welcome to this edition of Wealth Without Borders podcast. And today I'm delighted to have with me on the show, Jerry Gray. Welcome to the show, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Howard.
And Jerry, I always ask this, as I think you know, whereabouts in the world are you today and what is the weather like?
The weather is awesome. It's actually summer weather, but we're in Spring Festival. I'm in Zhongshan, Guangdong province, probably about 2,000 kilometers, a little less than 2,000 kilometers from you. But the weather is great. It's really t-shirt weather today, 24, 25 degrees.
Well, you've made most of the world's population pretty jealous, you know, the other side of China, as it were.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are in China, it's better here.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm slightly jealous. And then brought to you by the virtues of technology. So Jerry, for those of you who don't know, has, I believe, lived and worked in the UK as well as Australia
Yes.
and China. Mm. And then apart from business experience and qualifications, Jerry knows China pretty well because he cycled across it 3 times, which is massively impressive. And then Jerry has the unique honor of being the only guest so far on my podcast who has no desire to sell you anything. So you can relax.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Happily retired, I think is the way to describe me.
There we go. Fantastic. And the podcast title today is Why Do Chinese Employees and Western Managers Have So Many Misunderstandings? So that is a great subject. So as you know, Jerry, we've got 8 questions in just 8 minutes. I will help you as we go along by giving you the time remaining. But are you ready to rock and roll, as they say?
I'd say I'm ready to go. When you're ready, I'm ready.
Fantastic. So 8 minutes to go. Question number 1. Who's your ideal client or person you'd like to communicate with?
I guess any manager of a business who is either a Chinese manager of a business that has a Western influence, either dealing with the West or many Western employees, or any foreign manager who's a manager of a business inside of China with mostly Chinese employees. Probably the reason being that Western management philosophy and Chinese workplace psychology have so many barriers between them. And that's the kind of person that I think is probably the best person who would have some kind of problem with their customers or with their staff. They'd be saying, why did I tell him to do this and he did that? And wondering what the problem was. And they're the people that I can usually help.
Great. And 7 minutes, 6 seconds remaining. Question number 2, you've touched on the barriers. What is the problem that you solve?
Probably the best way to describe it is a word I invented myself. It is called cultural linguistic issues. And I'll give you a good example of this. If I say to a Chinese person, hey, what's the best holiday you've ever had? They'll tell me about Spring Festival or National Day or one of the festivals that they have where they get together with their family and do things. If I ask yourself, or somebody from Germany or Holland or a European manager or American manager, they say, oh, it was 2 weeks in an island in the Pacific or something completely different. And this is what I would call cultural linguistic. The word holiday has a meaning, and it has a completely different meaning when your culture doesn't actually have a culture of holidays. So you can misunderstand something just by saying the wrong thing. I mean, there are millions of them, but holiday is the greatest example and the easiest example that I can come up with. It causes a fundamental shift in the understanding of what people think they're doing, what people think they want, and what people expect to get when they've actually asked something in the wrong way. And I noticed a little while ago you had a linguistics expert on, and that was a really interesting thing for me because linguistics does it, but culture is much more important, in my opinion.
Okay, fascinating response. 5 minutes, 38 remaining, Jerry. Question number 3. What are the typical symptoms people experience who have this cultural linguistic problem?
Well, apart from communication problems, it could be morale issues as well. You'd have people who say, I don't enjoy working here because they have this fundamental problem with the communication. And it may be inside the workplace. Workplace psychology, national identity, these two things can clash sometimes. It could end up being production failures, legal problems. It could be all kinds of different things. It could be catastrophic failure of your business. And there are literally examples of hundreds of businesses that have come to China expecting to do well and failed miserably. And sometimes the managers go away wondering why. They never ever find out. So yeah, it could be catastrophic.
Got you. So serious ramifications potentially. 4 minutes 44 remaining. Question number 4. What are the common mistakes people make when they're trying to solve this problem?
If we're going to talk about a foreign manager, an international manager in China, then resolving an issue in the traditional way that you'd resolve it in your own country. Because when we go back, we all, as we're kids coming out of schools, colleges, whatever, we all know about Hertzberg's and Maslow's theories, and we understand about what motivates people and how they work. Well, in fact, the very fundamentals are upside down here. The Hertzberg's and Maslow's theories do not work in a Chinese environment. You need to find out different levels of motivation, different reasons, and different satisfaction issues. So if you really think about them in a different way, then it helps you a lot.
Okay, so perhaps turning the pyramid on its head probably helps.
I was actually thinking about saying that, but turn the pyramid upside down would necessarily help, because you have something called a power distance index. The manager is almost God here. Now, of course, if you're turning over that pyramid and you're making management much smaller, then it really is the manager is the most important person in a company. The manager needs to tell people what to do and how to do it, and the people will.
Got you. So 3 minutes 34 remaining. Question number 5. What's one valuable free action the audience can implement today that will help them solve some, if not all, of that problem?
Not necessarily free, but not necessarily a cost either. Employ someone who has cross-cultural change management experience. If you're in a company and you have a human resource manager who is Chinese managing Chinese people, even that HR manager doesn't understand the management philosophies. If you've got someone who's trained overseas and understands and has been trained in a management philosophy from overseas, they would do better, I think. Cross-cultural change management in your HR department.
Great. 2 minutes 51 remaining, Jerry. Question number 6. What's one valuable free resource you can direct people to that will further help them with the problem?
There's a Dutch psychologist. Anybody who studies workplace psychology would know of Kurt Hofstede. He has a website called hofstede-insights.com. And that's probably the best place that I could suggest someone goes. And what you can do, you scroll down to the bottom of his first page there, and you can type in your own country, and then you can type in the country where you're working, and you could look at the differences in the national identities and how people respond to different stimulus.
Fantastic.
Stimuli.
And we'll put the link into the podcast.
Yeah.
Just 2 minutes, 6 seconds remaining. Question number
5. Time.
What concept, book, program, or talk has been most impactful in your experience?
Going back to how I first started this, because I came to China not as a business person, but as a teacher, and I read a book which was written by a guy called Michael Harris Bond, and it was called Beyond the Chinese Face. And Michael Harris Bond is a psychologist. He's quite qualified to write psychology papers, but what he did was he took the psychology of Chinese and he turned it into layman's terms. So it became a very readable book. And from there, Chinese people can understand their own psychology better. What it doesn't do is it doesn't help the Chinese person understand the Western, but it certainly would help the Western person understand the Chinese, as it did with me. It started me off on a path and a route, or a route if the Americans are listening, to understanding Chinese culture a lot better than I did.
Fantastic. And again, we'll put that into the podcast.
Yeah.
1 minute remaining. Question number 8. What's the one question I should have asked you that would give great value to our audience?
I love this question. Where should a potential investor or business manager go to get information? And the answer to it would be anywhere that is not mainstream media. Almost everything that you have ever learned about China from reading a newspaper is not correct. And you go to the BBC, you go to the ABC, you go to CNN, they are not telling you what is correct. There is so much misinformation. And I believe it is deliberately misinforming people that China is a very safe place. China is a very stable place. China is a good place to do business. And if you're going to get information about China, you need to get it from on the ground within China, from people like yourself who've been here and who understand and who know this, not from the newspaper reports.
Fantastic. What a brilliant 8-minute interview there. You just finished with 3 seconds to go. So I think maybe I'll some kind of medal system. I think you just won gold there, Jerry.
Thank you. What an achievement.
Thank you so much. Packed in again a lot of value into a very short time, which to me demonstrates the mastery of one's area of expertise. So thank you for being a guest.
Yes, no problem at all. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed that. It's a bit of a challenge. The 8 minutes is good fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Many thanks for checking out Wealth Without Borders podcast. I'd love you to head over to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you'd be kind enough to do that, I would really appreciate it. And then if you want to know more about what I do, check out wealthwithoutborders.net.